For over 100 years, from 1864 until its closure in 1969, a tramway ran along Ryde Pier. For hundreds of thousands of excited holidaymakers, this tram ride was their first experience of the Isle of Wight. Boats have ferried working people and their goods between Ryde and Portsmouth since at least the 15th century. But to get to the shore at low tide, they were crammed onto horse-drawn wagons across half a mile of mud. Wealthy and fashionable visitors were beginning to visit other seaside resorts, and something had to be done. The Ryde Pier Company opened the world's first pleasure pier in 1814. After paying the toll, visitors could arrive in Ryde, clean and dry, in their Sunday best clothes. By 1833, the pier was extended far enough out to allow the Ryde and Portsmouth Royal Mail steam packet ships to dock, and day trippers flocked in their hundreds to the seaside resort. Now a faster way was needed to get them to the Esplanade, where they could spend their money. The Ryde Pier Company built a second pier alongside the first, with a double-track tramway opening in 1864. They hoped to use the latest technology, a small steam locomotive, to haul the carriages. But early engines were noisy and very unreliable. Horses were safer. A new Isle of Wight railway connected Ryde to Shanklin and Redmond. It only went as far as St John's Road Station, 3/4 of a mile away from the pier gates. Carriages queued to take posh visitors to the station. Less wealthy tourists had to walk. It wouldn't be until 1871 that the tramway was extended through the streets of Ryde to the station. The tramway avoided marshy ground by going straight through the ground floor of Holywell House in the Strand. The tramcars were not all the same. Some were enclosed single-deck vehicles, and some were double-deck cars with an open top deck. Perfect for the summer, but not so good on rainy days. 10 years later, the railway was extended to take trains all the way through to the pier head. The tracks ran on a third pier alongside the tramway pier, and the tramway through the streets was abandoned. The popularity of the pier itself continued to grow, and the pier's original wooden pilings were replaced in cast iron. The trams were full of tourists, and the company continued to experiment with new technologies. But once again, none were as reliable as the horses. Finally, in 1886, the company found the perfect solution. The tramway was electrified using a third rail. Ryde Pier was now home to England's first electric-powered standard gauge trams, and they featured on the resort's picture postcards for the next 40 years. This tramcar is double-ended and can be driven from either end. It was built in 1911 by Ryde coach builders Pollard & Sons. It frequently ran with trailer car number 4, affectionately known as the Grapes car. In the 1920s, the Southern Railway took over all the island's railways, including the Ryde Pier Company. They replaced the aging electric trams with 2 new petrol-engine tramcars, built by the Drury Railcar Company. The 2 Drury cars were single-ended and always ran with the driver facing towards the shore, which meant that they had to be driven backwards up the pier. After running through the buffers at the pier head several times, marker points were installed to remind the driver when to brake. The Drury tramcars ran for another 40 years, and their petrol engines were replaced with more economical diesel engines in 1959. At its peak, about 1,500 people squashed into the tramway cars to and from the ferries every hour. On summer Saturdays, each car was full to bursting. But modern safety standards were approaching. In 1969, the tramway was condemned and closed down. Over 100 years of seaside holiday history was over. Today, the Isle of Wight Steam Railway brings these memories of the past to living, breathing life. This painstaking restoration work often starts with very humble beginnings. After being replaced in 1927, the Pollard car was used as a chicken coop, then rescued from auction, restored and gifted to us in 2017. We continue to tell the story of the Isle of Wight's railways and are rebuilding Drury number 2 with a new trailer car to run with our other trains and preserve this icon of the pier's history for our visitors to enjoy.
Like many parts of the country, the 1963 Beeching Report proposed closing the remaining railways on the island, but the ferry to Ryde was the main route to the island, and the railway provided connections to the main towns. In 1965, after considerable opposition, the Minister of Transport ruled that the train service should be retained between Ryde and Shanklin and the line electrified. When Ryde to Shanklin opened in 1864, it had brand new trains, but subsequently, second-hand ones from the mainland have been used, and this continued with electrification. Although the island's railways were standard gauge, some bridges were too low and narrow for most mainland trains. Building a small number of new trains to fit was too expensive, so London tube trains, which had been withdrawn from the Piccadilly line, were chosen. 44 tube cars were overhauled, and some seats were removed to provide luggage space. After test runs on the mainland, each car was shipped to the island on board the Portsmouth to Fishbourne vehicle ferry. The first car arrived on the island on the 1st of September 1966 and was soon sent on a gauging run, hauled by our locomotive, Cowboy. When the conversion work was complete, testing on the line to Shanklin began, and the railway reopened on the 20th of March 1967. The trains were formed so that they could be operated either as 4 or 7 car sets. Initially the service was hourly, but this increased during the summer, especially on Saturdays, when most holidaymakers travelled to and from the island, when there were trains every 12 minutes. The staff at Ryde Works, where the trains were maintained, were inventive and found ingenious ways to keep these 40-year-old trains working. To prevent ice from forming on the conductor rail and enable trains to run in frosty weather, they even converted a spare driver's cab to spray de-icing fluid using scrap materials. It cost them a £5. The trains had been designed to run in the tube tunnels in London and could be cold and drafty on winter days on the island. The drivers were even issued with thermal long johns to help keep them warm. Improvements were made to the trains over the years, and they were at one stage repainted in British Railways blue and grey intercity livery. Rather a misnomer, as the island has no cities. The trains gave sterling service, but as the years passed, demand reduced, and so as some of the cars became life expired, they were cannibalised to keep others running. In 1988, Network South East, which now operated the island's railway, decided that replacement trains were needed. The cost-effective option was again selected, and more tube cars made redundant by London Underground were purchased. These trains had been introduced in 1938, and when retired from the Northern Line, were only a few years younger than the ones they would replace. 18 cars were thoroughly overhauled and modernised at Eastleigh Works, and looked very smart in the Network South East livery. The first train was shipped to the island in summer 1989, entering service in May 1990. Network South East continued to improve the island line. It opened a new station at Lake in 1987 and another at Smallbrook Junction in 1991 to connect with the steam railway, and the train service increased to a 20-minute frequency throughout the year. In 1996, the island line was privatised. Despite the best efforts of Ryde Works staff to keep the 80-year-old trains running, the number of usable trains reduced. In 2019, the Department of Transport agreed to fund a route modernisation, which included new trains. On the 3rd of January 2021, this train was withdrawn. The new trains were built using retired 1978 District Line cars, benefiting from aluminium bodies. After they were withdrawn in 2017, Viva Rail developed a method of reusing the original body with new wheels and equipment. The trains have been fitted out to modern standards, including USB sockets and digital information systems. The 5 two-car trains are able to run singly or in pairs. Track alterations have been made in order to run a 30-minute interval service. Because the new trains are bigger than the ones they replace, tracks have been lowered under some bridges and platform heights raised.